What is reconciliation? What are we even reconciling? You cannot create an effective solution without fully understanding the problem. So my objective with this presentation is to talk about this truth from many different perspectives. Welcome to Truth Before Reconciliation. My name is Jason. I am Alice and I am from Tobic First Nations. Both my parents, they worked on my reserve. My dad was a social worker and my mom was the after-school coordinator. But things started to change when I was about 9 years old, when my parents started spending more time on the res and less time at home. And then that's when my parents told me the full truth. Many of the people that I worked with were dealing with issues surrounding drug abuse, food scarcity, depression, anxiety. While I was in university, I had taken a sociology course and a political science course. And when my professors tried to talk about Indigenous issues, it was very obvious they had no idea what they were talking about. They would just make statements like, we need more Indigenous doctors, lawyers, and CEOs, but never really asking the question why we don't have Indigenous doctors, lawyers, or CEOs. So this picture was taken in 2020. This community in particular reached out to us because suicide had been on the rise in their community, and their children and youth were starting to express thoughts of suicide. How did we end up in a situation where food is so scarce in this supposed first world country? There are several layers and decades of abuse and neglect that brought us to where we are today. So the Indian Act is a set of laws that were specifically designed to govern Indigenous people. The Indian Act made it illegal for Indigenous people to practice their culture. Do I want to be able to see my family, or do I want to have an education? The residential school system was hell on earth. Children were abducted from their families and taken to these institutions, often against their will and the will of their parents. The priests and the nuns would always eat their share first, and then they gave what was left over to the children. And this would manifest itself into a psychological endemic known as intergenerational trauma. So what is intergenerational trauma? Well, it's often described as trauma passed on from one generation to the next. But how does it manifest itself in reality? So these children who were subjected to these awful forms of abuse had a lot of trauma embedded into their nervous system. These people are in a constant state of anxiety and depression. So trauma doesn't only embed itself into the nervous system, it also embeds itself into the ovaries. So if a person that's experiencing trauma becomes pregnant, they will pass that trauma onto their child. And if that child is a girl, there's a chance that the trauma will also be embedded into her ovaries as well. One person's trauma and pain is passed on biologically to 2 generations. I once visited a reserve that had experienced a child suicide. And the thing is, with suicides in Indigenous communities is that they usually happen in clusters. So, if one person kills himself, it isn't uncommon for someone else to do it. And sure enough, there was a second suicide that week. The 2 girls were cousins, and they had both hung themselves. 2 children commit suicide in a small community of 300 people. One girl was 10 years old, the other one was 12. Let's sit with that for a second. Many people have told me about their suicide attempt stories or why they're feeling suicidal. And the reason I hear about it the most is hopelessness. There's not much to hope for when the government has pushed you to the edge of society and left you to fend for yourself. And there's not much to hope for when you're in a constant state of anxiety and depression and you have no idea where it even came from and you have no idea how to fix it. Indigenous people just want to be treated like how other Canadians are. And that means there needs to be mutual respect. Respect for culture, respect for sovereignty, and respect in governance. Progress is slow, but we are moving forward. So the Canadian government is working on the calls to action too, but they are pretty slow. Since the calls to actions were created back in 2015, a total of 13 have been achieved. That means we won't be done until the mid-2060s. So how can you help? Well, by learning about what has happened to our Indigenous people, you are playing an active role in reconciliation. So, what is reconciliation? Acknowledgement of the past and mutual respect for the future. That's it.